Hello crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I'm here to share one of Gerda Steiner Design's newest stamp sets called Happy Fall, but I'm going to be combining it with some older stamp sets as well. So the Happy Fall stamp set is also called the Squirrel stamp set because, as you can see, there are quite a few really adorable images of squirrels. I'm very excited to get a chance to use all the different images, but the one that really stood out to me was that squirrel who has his head thrown back and his hands in the air and is just so excited. I think he's meant to be excited about fall, but today I'm going to combine him with some of the other images that Gerda Steiner has where the animals have that same sort of delight on their faces. You might remember that elephant from Heavy Friends and this little chick from Hello Spring. I've done cards with both of those two stamps before, and I've done a card with them combined where the little chick was being stamped with the elephant as the elephant was bursting the chick into the air and just kind of play with their happy love of life that those two images have. And now that this squirrel has that same thing, I just had to use them all together. I just love that sort of enthusiasm that she's able to portray in the stamps, a lot of emotion that the characters have. So I needed the elephant to only be stamped once because it's a little bit a need, but I wanted, because he's a little bit bigger than the other stamps, and he also is going to have something coming out of his trunk. So I knew that I wanted to put him either to the left or right side of the card, and then that would kind of leave a frame for the sentiment on the opposite side. So since I settled on putting him in the bottom right, and the hearts above him, then I know that the top left will be where my sentiment goes because I've left some clear blank space for it in that area. The reason that I put the elephant on the right is because with the squirrel, I wanted the squirrel to be next to him, and the squirrel's tail was a little bit in the way of them being as close to each other, whereas with the chick, I can kind of tuck him under the squirrel's tail, and they can be a little bit closer together, and I can fit a few more images on the stamp set. So I'm going to get a squirrel and a partial squirrel, a chick and a partial chick, and then, of course, like I said before, just the single elephant. I chose to have the hearts coming out of the elephant in this instance, but there's also a spray of water. But this card, I'm going to use the sentiment, yippee. And I figure that this will allow me to use this particular card for a number of occasions. It can be used as a congratulations, a happy birthday, but even just to send, just to make someone smile, because I think that these images certainly would. I stamped all my images in My Favorite Things Black Licorice Hybrid ink because I'm doing this Copic coloring. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Copic coloring I'm doing today because, as I mentioned in an earlier video this week, I've been experimenting with adding a little bit more contrast to my images by using two colors that are close to each other on the Copic number system, and then a color that is a little bit higher up to get more contrast. So I used Y15 and Y18 for most of my coloring, but for the deepest shadow I went with a Y38. It has the same last number as my darkest color, as my darker of the two, so essentially as the Y18, but it has a higher first number. And I found this to be a pretty good way to pick a color that would still blend well, but present a little bit deeper of a shadow and add a little bit more dimension to the critter. And so you see that I used that trick on the chick, and I'm also going to use it here on the squirrel. I'm using E33, 35, 37, or maybe it's just 35 and 37. It depends on how light you want your shadows to go. But because E37 was my darkest marker, I went with an E77 for the deepest shadows. Again, matching that last number on the color family to the deepest shadow that I'm going to get by pulling a marker outside of the color family. I hope that that explanation makes sense and is helpful to some people who might be seeing that others are getting that really high contrast and are wondering how to get that effect. I, as I said before, am no Copic expert, and a lot of the logic behind why I tried this out came from the online card classes Copic for Card Makers, which was taught by Jennifer McGuire, Christina Warner, but Sandy Allnock as well, who is the expert in Copic coloring. So I recommend checking out her channel or that class to learn more about Copics. I probably tell you to watch Sandy Allnock like all the time, but she's amazing and I watch her videos constantly. And here I'm going to show you her hex chart as well, because I love her and her hex chart. So I'm using the hex chart to help me pick my greens, because after I finish this, I was going to keep it really clean and simple and just leave all that space white, but I just had to give them more of a scene. So I decided to color some grass. And what I want is two colors that will not be so close to each other that they completely blend in, because I want blades of grass. And my Y, G, and G markers are pretty sporadic, and I always struggle to find the perfect grass color. So I find that hex chart to be helpful to kind of see the colors next to each other, see how they compare, help me to understand how I can use my YGs with my Gs to get a big enough range of green. To create grass, what I'm generally trying to do is always use a flicking motion. Even if I color solid for a while, go over with flicks, because I want it to look like blades of grass. This is just my base layer here first, but even in the base layer, particularly between the animals where the grass will have a stopping point, I am making sure to use that flicking motion, because I don't want it to be a harsh line. Grass obviously does not end in a harsh line, but has lots of blades, and so that flicking motion is the best way that I found to create the blades of grass. I did struggle a little bit with getting blades that were like really wide on the end, so if this is your first time, I might recommend kind of trying to get the flick motion on a piece of scrap paper, see if you like it, if you think that's good enough for your thin blades of grass, so that you don't wind up with some of these squattier, thick at the bottom blades of grass that I did. So I laid off that overall coat of the YG13, then I came in with the darker G14 for the flicks, and then I'm going back again with the YG13, the same color I used at first, and adding in more flicks. Right now, it looks a little too blended, but it actually dries back so that there are two clear, distinct colors of blades of grass. And so I definitely urge you sometimes when you're not quite sure that your Copics are working the way that you expected them to, sometimes you actually just have to give it a minute to dry, as it does settle into the paper a little bit differently than it goes on sometimes. I then decided, well, I have to create a sky, but I wasn't going to Copic color a sky because that would take forever, and I'm lazy sometimes. But also because I thought a really soft sky would be easily achieved by some tumbled glass distress ink. So I just put my foam pad from the bottom of my pad onto my tool, my blending tool here, by keeping them velcroed to the bottom. It's always easy to find my foam blenders, and I'm just going to spread it all along the edges. When you're spreading it to the inside, be sure to just use a very light touch. So that is it for my card today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're interested in more crafty videos, including tutorials with Gerda Steiner designs, as you saw, Copic markers and distress ink, please subscribe to my channel. I am going to leave you links to all of these Gerda Steiner designs stamp sets in the video description below. Thanks for watching. Bye.